future mother-in-law threatened to boycott our wedding over a prenup. I let her boycott herself right out of our lives. I built my company from nothing when I was 23 years old. I started with a small online business selling handmade jewelry and grew it into a brand that now operates in 12 countries. By the time I was 30, I had more money than I ever imagined possible. I bought my parents a house. I paid off my sister's student loans. I invested wisely and watched my wealth multiply. Everything I had came from my own hands and my own ideas and years of sleepless nights building something real. I met my fiancé Graham at a charity event 2 years ago. He worked as a high school teacher and made a modest salary that he loved because he genuinely cared about educating kids. He had no idea who I was when we started talking. He just thought I was a woman in a nice dress who laughed at his terrible jokes. We exchanged numbers and went on a date that weekend. I didn't tell him about my money until our third date because I wanted to make sure he liked me for me. When I finally explained what I did and how successful the company had become, he looked surprised, but not interested in the way I'd seen from other men. He didn't ask how much I was worth. He didn't suddenly start suggesting expensive restaurants. He just said that was impressive and asked if I wanted to split the check like we'd been doing. I knew then that Graham was different. We dated for 18 months before he proposed with a ring he saved for over a year to afford. It wasn't expensive by my standards, but it meant everything because he earned every penny himself. I said yes immediately, and we started planning our wedding. That's when I met his mother Opal, and everything got complicated. Opal was pleasant enough during our first few meetings. She asked about my work, and I kept things vague because I didn't want to make a big deal about the money. She knew I owned a business, but I don't think she understood the scale until she visited my house for the first time. I live in a gated community in a 5-bedroom home with a pool and a view of the mountains. When Opal walked through the front door, her entire demeanor changed. She started asking very specific questions. She asked how much the house cost. She asked if I owned it outright or had a mortgage. She asked about my investments and my retirement accounts and my future plans for the business. I answered politely but briefly. I didn't like where this was going. After that visit, Opal became intensely interested in the wedding. She offered to help plan everything. She suggested vendors and venues and caterers. Every suggestion happened to be the most expensive option available. She said her son deserved the best, and since I could clearly afford it, why not go all out? I told her Graham and I wanted something simple and meaningful. She said simple was code for cheap and people would talk. When I mentioned the prenup to Graham, he understood completely. He said he'd sign whatever made me comfortable because he wasn't marrying me for money. He said he'd been poor his whole life and planned to keep working regardless of what I had. He said protecting what I built before we met was just common sense. I loved him even more for that response. Opal had a very different reaction. Graham made the mistake of mentioning the prenup during a family dinner. Opal put down her fork and stared at me like I'd insulted her entire bloodline. She asked if I didn't trust her son. I said I trusted him completely, but this was standard practice when one partner had significant assets. She said standard practice was for celebrities and billionaires who thought they were better than everyone else. She asked if I thought I was better than her family. I said this had nothing to do with being better. I said I built my company before I met Graham, and I wanted to protect it the same way I would protect any business asset. The dinner ended badly. Opal didn't speak to me when we left. Graham apologized the whole drive home and promised to talk to her. He said she'd come around once she understood the prenup wasn't about distrust. She didn't come around. She got worse. Opal called me directly the next week and said she would not attend our wedding if we signed prenup. She said no mother should have to watch her son marry someone who already planned for their divorce. She said Graham deserved someone who would share everything with him unconditionally. I told her the prenup was happening regardless of her feelings. She said then she wouldn't be at the wedding. She hung up before I could respond. Graham was devastated. Opal was demanding I risk everything I'd built to prove my love to a woman who'd known me for less than a year. I decided to call her bluff. I told Graham we should proceed with the wedding exactly as planned, prenup included. If his mother wanted to boycott, that was her choice. He agreed reluctantly. We sent out invitations. We booked the venue. We arranged catering and flowers and music. We did everything without Opal's input since she'd made it clear she wasn't participating. Opal assumed I would crack under pressure. She told Graham's sister that I would come crawling back once I realized how serious she was. She told relatives she was standing on principle, and I would eventually see reason. She waited for me to call and beg her to come to the wedding. I never called. 2 weeks before the wedding, Opal reached out to Graham asking for an update on the prenup situation. He told her we signed it last month. She exploded. Full story on channel. Link below.